So welcome everybody. We're going to get started right away. Welcome to our Cyberwise Chat, whether you're joining us in the webinar or via the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about Ready or Not, AI is Coming, Is Your Child Prepared? All right, so I'm Diana Graber. I'm the author of Raising Humans in a Digital World, here as always with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who is the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. And we're really excited to have Perry Reed join us today. He is a researcher, designer, and storyteller. And a little side note, the three of us are really connected because of Fielding Graduate University's Media Psychology program. So we're really grateful for that. And that is where Perry is doing some really exciting research that he's going to tell you about. He's just wrapping up his doctorate, and he's done some great research in AI, or artificial intelligence, that he will share with us. But first, I'd like to start today with a really simplistic definition of AI, just so that we're all on the same page. So AI, it's not some big scary thing. It's simply the ability of a machine or computer to perform tasks that have historically required human intelligence. And the way they do this is because they train on data. And that's data that we freely give away every time we do anything online, fill out a form, use a chatbot, all that stuff. It collects our data, it trains on that data, and it makes predictions. So it's not magical thinking, it's actually science that we'll talk about as well. But it seems like it's been all over the news lately because it has. Recent innovations in technology and computer processing power has really accelerated its growth. So we're starting to see AI everywhere. In addition to that, we're starting to see a lot of what are more or less scary headlines. I'm going to read a few of them to you. This is my favorite. Hold off on having kids if you're yet to become a parent, warns AI expert Mo Gawat. Even Google is warning its employees about AI chatbots use. Open AI leaders call for regulation to prevent AI destroying humanity, and millions of lonely young men are about to get AI girlfriends. So Pam, how concerned should parents be about AI?
Well, I'm going to answer that backwards. So first of all, what we're seeing here is the beginning of a really dandy moral panic, right? And I just want to make sure that everybody understands what's going out there, because what we're seeing is in tremendous exaggeration. This is not 2001 Space Odyssey. So the robots are not sentient. They are not going to take over the world. However, all these stories are being amplified by the tech companies and the politicians. What does that do for them? It keeps them in control. So be aware of the level of manipulation in these kind of moral panics. We've had them before: radio, television, rock music, the devil's music, Dungeons and Dragons, that satanic ritual, video games causing school shootings, social media corrupting our youth, and now AI with robots taking over. So the question, should parents be concerned? The real question is, are you preparing your kids for the environment they're going to be living in? If you have not taught them the things that Diana spends her, professional career doing, critical thinking, understanding privacy, understanding about manipulation and persuasion, if they are not prepared, then yes, by God, you should be worried like crazy, and not just about AI.
I love that one. So I totally agree, 100%. And I love the fact that you point out moral panics, because we actually covered one just 6 months ago. Do you remember we did a chat on the metaverse, because that was big in the news and everyone was freaking out about that. And if you notice, that has not been in the headlines lately. Now this is our new moral panic. So it's always something that parents need to worry about. But we're here hopefully today to give you some tools to help you prepare your kid to use this stuff well. And I think Perry's going to have some really great insights on that. And I'd like to start today, Perry, with you sharing the research that you're doing or have done on AI, and specifically how parents might learn from it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I've just completed my dissertation research and finalizing that manuscript now, but I've really been interested in AI, even though it's been around for a long time, because of this latest trend of what you see called generative AI or creative AI, which is when AI produces some sort of content, whether it's text, images, songs, etc. And I was really fascinated by the text generating ones to start, because they're designed to mimic human-like conversational responses. But at the end of the day, it's interactive, but it's just taking in what you said and based off of its data models, predicting what you want to hear. But our human brains are so wired to tell complete stories and find meaning and significance that we can really put a lot of weight into the output of AI machines. There's two tests, so to speak, in AI that have really fascinated me, and I incorporated both into my research. One is the Turing test, based off of Alan Turing, which has been around, for decades, and that's, can a computer do something that tricks a human observer into thinking they were talking to a human? And then there's also now the Lovelace test, which is really more about the creativity of AI. And it's based for an 1800s mathematician, sometimes called the first computer programmer, Ada Lovelace, who said, oh no, computers will never be creative. Whether she said that or not aside, the idea is, can a computer produce something that a human observer deems to be creative and have some sort of value? And so my current study, I really looked into a tool, ChatGPT, which I'm sure you've read in some of those headlines, and had it produce some short fiction stories for me. And then I put it through an experiment where I had US adults across the country do an online study where they read the story, but I manipulated whether they were told it was AI or not. And I really wanted to see how they cognitively engaged with the story, if they felt those emotional connections to the story characters. And then after that, how did they rate the creativity of the author of the story? And what was really fascinating is that I found that whether you told people it was AI or not, they were actually still able to engage in the story the same way. They got involved with the characters, the settings, the plots. And then they also felt similarly about how creative the writer was. It didn't dissuade them that they had been told, if they had been told it was written by AI. And for me, what this really means is that we're just seeing points in time, right? Research done a year ago had different results. That was before AI was all over the news media, on social media, and even before ChatGPT was publicly available. So I think we're at a really interesting time where all of these tools that have been in development for years, privately, are now coming to the public forefront, and we're able to really respond and react to them for the first time over these last several months. So that's my key takeaway, is that we can engage in the content that AI produces. We can feel emotional connections to it. We're wired to make meaning from what we see. And we can even find it creative, which is very interesting since, traditionally creativity has been the hallmark of humanity. So that's what I've been studying.
I just want to add something that, because I think that's really interesting what you found, Perry, in that emotional engagement, because, for a long time, we've been talking about how the human brain responds to visuals as if we were real. In other words, the fact that we're not in the same room, if we smile at each other, we still have that instinctive response. But what your research is showing is that that ability to become emotionally engaged, to feel presence, narrative transportation, also creates that same simulation of reality to us, so that we're not differentiating between, mediated text and, handwritten or human written text. So I think that that's a really, really reflective of, as you say, the way the human brain is wired.
Now I have a question about that, Perry. So let's say you're a teacher and you have kids that have to write an essay and they use ChatGPT to write it for them. Is that making it harder for a teacher to detect which is generated by AI and which is generated by an actual student? Is that making their job harder? Or let's say you're a news organization and a reporter uses ChatGPT to create an article. I mean, it brings up all those kind of questions. Did you think about that while you were doing your research or afterwards?
Yes, and definitely as I've gone into the discussion phase of what do my research results mean, I think there definitely is an issue, especially where we're at right now, where it can be hard to detect at first glance something produced by ChatGPT, because it's so good at mimicking human language, and it's been trained on vast quantities of data we can't even fathom. And so at first glance and at surface level, yes. Now it's when you try and go a step deeper, what did someone actually learn from it? That's where you can quickly spot it or not. But I do think right now where we're at, there is going to be some difficulty with detecting plagiarism based off of the text alone. There's some AI, ironically, AI tools being developed to see if something was AI generated, but there will be some difficulty. And even in our research lab at Field and Graduate University, we've laughed because we've looked through some bot data, because sometimes, AI bots are out there trying to, answer surveys and all these things. And they're pretty good at giving surface level responses that seem really legit. So you have to go a little deeper to really figure out, you can't just go off of that surface level.
Right.
Yeah, there's been research recently on accuracy levels of these text bots, ChatGPT and the like, in terms of their ability to pull information. And I think this is one of the really important messages that parents can give to kids, is that don't assume because it sounds like a human that it knows what it's talking about. In one research study on medical procedures, ChatGPT was about 60% accurate. And I don't know about you, but when I go to the doctor, I'm kind of hoping for a little more higher level of accuracy in my diagnosis. So it's a great tool for getting started, but it just makes stuff up. So yes, Perry, it is creative. AI is very creative
Yeah.
because if it needs to make a point, it will synthesize data together inappropriately.
Yeah, it's funny because I use ChatGPT a lot out of curiosity mostly. And I remember once I asked it who I was, and it gave me credit for a book I'd never written, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like I didn't even have to write a book, and it's out there. It says I did, you know. So, but yeah, a lot of inaccuracies, which really underscores what you said at the beginning, Pam, is like if your child does not know how to evaluate online information, boy, they have to know it now, because it's hard enough when you're getting information from the internet and you're seeing sources and references and cross-referencing and all that. ChatGPT doesn't do that. So you have no way to know what they're doing, you know, if it's true or accurate. Although I did see, and I think it's Microsoft's new AI tool is starting to give references and actually linking to the internet. And so, you know, we're right now revamping our curriculum for next year, and all the teachers are saying, are you going to talk about ChatGPT? And what we're recommending is, you know, if a kid's going to look something up on ChatGPT, also do it on the internet. Don't just rely on a chatbot. You've got to cross-reference it, check your sources, still know how to do good research using, you know, whatever search engine you use. So
yeah, it'll give you references. They just may not be real.
Yeah. Very creative. So, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about something I hear kids really love are these art generators, the AI art generators. They're really big right now. I don't know who to go to first, but if either of you wanted to kind of jump in and give some examples of some and how kids are using them. I don't know if that's come up in your research, Perry. I know, Pam, you've looked into that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I've actually personally been using one Midjourney for my consulting business right now, just to get us started to produce images based off of, you know, prompts that we put in. Really, when we talk about these art tools, we're putting in text-based prompts and producing images. And there's some tools out there like Midjourney that are super robust, but you have to really know how to develop the prompts. And there's others that are a little more surface level where, you know, okay, pick your style, put in text, we'll do something with it. But what's really fascinating, I think this is where you see a lot of the talk about what are the legal boundaries and who owns the content, et cetera, because some of these tools can actually pull from copyrighted artworks, or they can pull celebrities' faces into their images. But, you know, that's on the concern side. On the positive side, it really is also an outlet for people to express themselves better. You know, we've used softwares and technologies for the last few decades to better express ourselves or to show creativity or try out different things. This is just a new version of that, that's letting people bring ideas to life in a new way that perhaps, you know, if they weren't spending hours learning Photoshop or, you know, an Illustrator tool, they may not have done.
Yeah, and I think the prompt thing is really interesting. There's so many teachable moments here, like writing a really effective prompt. What a great English language art skill, because as you mentioned, you know, these AI art generators, they're only as good as the information you give it. And so to give it very descriptive words and terms, I think is really a great skill for a child to develop.
And I think that's one of the really positive ways to use tools like that, whether they're the visual tools or the text tools, is create assignments that involve critical thinking about what you get back. We have a question here about, you know, what is the accuracy of AI in when they're summarizing something? And you have to check. I asked it the other day because I'm working on a book chapter where, like, what are the major constructs in media psychology? And it had some really interesting constructs in there, but it missed a lot and it added a couple that weren't relevant. So you really have to, you can't suspend your brain when it comes to AI. You really have to use it as a tool. So important to tell kids. Recent research that funded by Common Sense Media found that 50% of kids are now using ChatGPT as a search tool. It's a great way to get started on some ideas, but it is not going to be accurate any more than just a random Google search. You really do have to triangulate information. Darren is making a good point too here about his concerns about plagiarism and all that. And I think that's where you really have to, as a teacher, be creative. I know a lot of teachers have been going, oh, we're just going to, make everybody write everything with pencils. But that would be a little bit like saying, throw out your calculators. So what I would encourage teachers to do is to figure out ways of backing these tools into it and making kids think about them.
Yeah, and gosh, I hope that we get to all of them today, because there's so many aspects of digital literacy this touches upon. One thing that I think about a lot is the ethical thinking piece, because the kids that are using AI today are the ones who are going to develop in the future. And they're already grappling with ethical issues, because kids want nothing more, a lot of them, than to be a creative artist in some manner. And when they start learning that, these tools they use are basically working off the backs of people who create art, right? And there's copyright violations all the time, and it's putting some artists out of work, and all of that stuff is of concern to kids. So they should be taught about that. One of the things we do in one of our new AI lessons is we talk about the next Rembrandt. Have you guys heard about that? You probably have. That Rembrandt's paintings were like analyzed by these AI systems, and a brand new Rembrandt painting was unveiled to the public. And so, wow, that brings up so many ethical concerns. Like, who's the artist? Who owns it? How would you feel if your art was like replicated years from now and someone else made a living off of it? So,
but remember, all of these things have been going on in different kinds of ways, right? When the internet first came out, we all had to learn, just because there was an image on Google search didn't mean you could use it, right? In other words, there was a learning curve to every level of accessibility. There have been people forging art for a long time.
Yeah.
So this is
a different way of doing it, right?
It's just a different way of doing it. So it just means we have to hone our ethical thinking skills and figure out, how do the things that we fundamentally believe are these values that we have, how do we apply them here, rather than say, oh my God, let's hold this balloon under the water, let's not let it out.
Yeah. So before we leave the topic of AI generated art, you use Midjourney, Perry?
Yes.
You mentioned a really good one for younger kids.
Well, I found an app called Sweet Dreams, which is for very little kids, which, Perry, you were describing Dreamweaver, which you had experience with growing up, where the kids just pick different icons or different characters in different settings, and the app helps them generate a story. So there's a lot of scaffolding in that kind of application. It's just gotten way more sophisticated with way better art than they used to have.
Yeah, and I hear the one, from like middle school, Dall E, I hope I'm saying that correctly. That seems to be a super popular art generator, pretty easy to use, that I hear the kids talk about a lot. So if you're curious about this, on the Cyberwise website, under our learning hubs, we have a new hub called Artificial Intelligence. And we gave you links to like what we hear are the most popular AI art generators, which we've just talked about, and then to the most popular chat bots. And just to distinguish between the two, like ChatGPT is a chatbot, and there's Google Bard has one. So there's a bunch of those as well. So if you're interested in trying these with your kids, which we highly recommend, please check out the website, go to the links, and give some of these a try. They're super fun. I play with them all the time. Really interesting.
And the ChatGPT and the Bing AI are free to experiment with. And I don't know about Dall E, Perry, you've probably got experience with that. How hard is it to use, and how much do they charge?
I can't remember what they charge. It's a little closer to Midjourney in terms of being a little more robust, but most of these give you a free trial to get started, where you can do, 25 images or something for free, which if you're just, playing around and trying to experience it with your kid and help them understand what it is, that's enough to get started.
And I understand there are also apps that will allow you to make coloring books, for example. And so I think it would be really interesting for Perry, if you want to just sort of share like some of the prompts that you use, because I was really surprised at how little you had to tell one of these image makers to get a coloring book page with some bunny rabbits on it that were extremely cute. So can you share the level of detail that a prompt has to be, so that parents, as they're going into experiment, have some sense of what they need to write in the box?
Sure. Well, I'll give a couple different examples. And one, I'll start with, if you're doing like a chat bot, it's all about providing context. So if you were going to go, I'll use a silly example, ChatGPT, give me a 3-day itinerary for my trip to Paris, you'll get something back. But if you start with, hey, I'm going to Paris for the first time. I love bakeries. I'm super active. I like to do outdoor things. I have a low budget. What should I do in Paris for 3 days? You'll get a much different response. And part of what you can do is you'll never get the same exact thing from ChatGPT twice, but you can see how changing up your prompt and the level of detail will change the output you get. When you get to these image generators, it's learning that, some of our English phrases or idioms don't always translate well. So it's being very literal about what you want to see, but it's also funny because when you see the results not as you want, that's how you learn, oh, I wanted a duck on top of a bear climbing an elephant or whatever you're trying to do. And then to get started, it's usually pretty simple. It's the difficulty is you can't easily produce multiple images that pair together well. So if you're trying to create like a collage of 10 different images and you want them all in the exact same style, same color palette, all of that, that's where it gets a little harder. But you can play around in Dall E and Midjourney with the styles. Show me an impressionism style or a cartoon style or a photorealistic style, and that's where you can start to see those differences. But to summarize that, when you're doing the text chat ones, use context, provide background to your prompt. And when you're doing the images, play around with it and see how literal you need to be about what you want to see. And then if you want to, you can play around with different stylings.
Those are great tips. And as far as the chatbots out there, besides ChatGPT, are there others that you like?
I'm personally just using ChatGPT. I have played around with Microsoft Bing and Bard. At this point, they're fairly similar. I'm sure we'll see more differentiation as they each continue to develop.
Doesn't ChatGPT power Bard anyway? So
it does. There's some talk that there's some tweaks to the responses, and again, this is where you see the headlines like Bing has a dark personality, and a chatbot used, a certain emoji or something. I think that's what we're seeing, right? Is ChatGPT powers the language response, but then different places it gets plugged in can also, using the endpoints of the APIs, tailor them for their needs as well, which makes it feel like a different experience, even if it's all the same backend at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I don't want to bring up too much doom and gloom, but I did want to mention this because Snapchat uses AI now. This is such an interesting story. Pam actually turned me on to it. But Snapchat unveiled this thing for its users where it has an My AI built in, which interestingly, the kids do not like. It's really a lot of low ratings have come out for Snapchat. But here's a little piece from the Washington Post about that AI tool. It reported that the bot was responding in an unsafe manner. After telling the user was a 15-year-old, the AI made suggestions about how to mask the smell of alcohol and pot at a birthday party. It also wrote an essay for school for the teen. When the bot was told the user was 13, it responded to a question about how to set the mood when having sex for the first time. So a lot of problems still with these AI tools. But
there would be no way to create any tool like that that could filter out all of that thing. Right. And so I'm going to go right back to the you got to train your kids angle here, because we seem to as a culture be really worrying about suppressing a lot of things, and these kids are going to figure out how to do it. So we really need to make sure that they have good critical thinking and moral judgment when they're using it, and they know when they're going to get into trouble. Yeah. And it wouldn't be the first time that a Playboy magazine was found under the bed of a 13-year-old, and there'll be a ChatGPT equivalent.
Yeah, and it's what social media has been feeding kids anyway, so it's not like it's new stuff. So it really underscores, talk to your kids about what they're seeing on social media. But what I found encouraging is the kids' backlash. Like, they do not like this tool. They find it super invasive and creepy. And I think that's really encouraging to hear, that they're going to be a little bit probably more critical about these tools, especially once we unveil to them that it's not magic. This is how it happens. There's biases built into all this stuff based on the data it collects. I mean, there's just a lot of warning signs that I'm excited personally to teach kids about.
Well, and that same, sorry, Perry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it all goes back to the cyber civics lesson of being a detective. And just like, at the beginning, you teach kids what are the component parts that go into a computer and how does that work? it's the same thing with these AI tools. And that's such an important first step into realizing it's just a tool. It's not going to be any more, reliable than what you already find on the internet or in other sources.
And so many parents are assuming that kids just, oh, good, now I can cheat. But in one survey, is the same number of kids as parents thought that ChatGPT should be outlawed in the classroom, or that there should be restrictions placed on it. They're not lining up to take the shortcut because they want to protect the integrity of their work, like Diana was saying. They don't want to have it be somebody else's. At the end of the day, that really destroys your self-esteem.
That goes right in line. I got to read this. Our friend Darren wrote this. I hope he's still here. Creative people will use AI to be more creative. Productive people will use AI to be more productive. Lazy people will use AI to be lazier, and some will use it to weaponize AI. It's the weaponization of AI that is my biggest concern, and we are starting to see this happening already with teens when it comes to morphing and weaponizing pictures of peers and educators. So that really goes back to cyberbullying and being kind online and all of that stuff that we should be talking to kids about.
And what to do if it happens.
Yeah.
That's a very important set of skills.
Exactly. So Perry, I wanted to ask you, because I so appreciate that you took the time to go through the cyber civics curriculum. For those of you who don't know, Perry conducted our focus group research this year, which we were so grateful to him for doing. And you had some excellent recommendations for us as far as incorporating AI lessons into the curriculum. Do you remember what those were? Do you want to elaborate?
I do. Yeah. So those focus groups were great. I got to talk to some of the veteran teachers who have really championed it and those who are newer to it. In terms of the AI recommendations, definitely there's great content in cyber civics about web searches and how they work. And that's certainly going to be due for an AI update because, just like we went from the card catalogs in the library to Googling for information, we're going to be incorporating these AI tools. The names of the tools may change, but some version of them will be there. And then also the plagiarism lessons, which we've already touched on here today. And I'll say the key points there is that ChatGPT it might organize information. It cannot write a strong argument.
Interesting.
And then I also would say that there's content around deep fakes, which, if anyone needs a refresher, that's where you see a video clip where it appears that a well-known person is doing something or saying something they didn't really do. And those have been around for a while, but AI tools are actually making those easier to generate. You may have seen some images of the Pope running from the police that many people thought were real. This is all new stuff, right? Since the last 10 years of the internet, we've seen all of this. The difference now is that those tools are becoming cheaper and more accessible to more people. So it's creating that extra level of vigilance that it's not some, very skilled programmer off doing these. It could be someone who just found the right AI tool and the right prompt to generate that. So that's really where I see AI coming in, is the web searches, finding information online, understanding plagiarism, and then really adding another layer of scrutiny to those very convincing media clips that we see circling the internet.
Absolutely. And, we're lucky that we can get to kids, but adults need these lessons too.
Yes.
Because every election cycle, especially, we fall prey to so much misinformation, and boy, what's coming is just a whole new level.
Ugly.
So we have to have scrutiny over everything that we look at online. And the other thing is, I touched on this earlier, and Pam mentioned this to me, it's like to make sure kids know this isn't magic. You know what I mean? Like, it's fallible. There's a lot of mistakes. And this really hit home for me because I do this lesson with the kids where they have to imagine they're building safety standards into an app they develop, And this year, for the first time, almost every kid said, oh, AI will do it. AI is going to take care of that. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, someone has to decide what that is, There has to be a human behind these decisions. So I think it's a knee-jerk reaction for us to just think AI can do it all. And, it starts with us. So I think it's important, number one, to make sure kids understand that.
Right. Yeah, there is no AI without that foundational prompt or algorithm or something to get it started, which means somebody made a decision about what goes in the black box.
Exactly. So we always wrap these things up with our 3 takeaways for parents, what they can do, what you recommend. Perry, I'm going to put you on the spot first. What would be your 3 big takeaways from today?
Ooh, my 3 big takeaways. The first one would be, since dawn of time, living creatures have used tools to extend their abilities and what they can do in the world. That's translated to technology, television, radio, computers, etc. AI is no different. It's the next version of that. And so it shouldn't be any scarier than the tools that we've used before us. We just have to think about them a little differently. The second one would be that while plagiarism is a big concern, there is a place for these AI tools that we need to think through in terms of education and helping people become critical thinkers, self-expression, creativity. And the third one I would say is, if you haven't tried them, do it. You know, whether it's you alone or you with your kid, just spend some time going through these tools, demystify what they are. They're going to be hearing about them. They're going to see examples floating around online, give them that firsthand experience of what it's like to use it. I think that's really critical at this point.
Great tips, Perry. Thank you. That was awesome. Pam, how about you?
I'm going to sound just like Perry with different words, right? First of all, AI is not as bad as you think. Do not panic. Second, AI is not going to be as good as you think, right? There are serious issues that we've been talking about with accuracy and bias and, garbage in, garbage out. ChatGPT pulls from the entire internet. Think about what's out there, right? That's an average. The third is, whether you use them or not, don't ignore the fact that your kids are going to have to, right? Talk, experiment, learn what you can, even if it's not going to make your life better. Be along for the ride. Don't leave them out on that journey alone.
Awesome, as always, Pam. So my tips really, they all intersect with our curriculum. That's as far as my brain can go today, because that's what we're working on. But these are like, there's so many lessons kids need. So number one, they have to understand how to analyze online information. I cannot underscore that a lot. There are tools, tips, and tricks they need to learn, and we got plenty of them. And Darren mentioned one of them here about teaching them to read laterally. And what that means is, if they ever have something on their browser that they're questioning, have them open a second tab and conduct their research there. And we have 3 great research questions that they can ask. And if you want to know what those are, we have the Cyber Civic Student Hub on YouTube. The videos are there. Help yourself. Number 2, creative work. And this is something that is so important to kids. I know they love lessons on copyright. Teach them the value of creative work, and that's how AI happens, especially their AI art comes from the work of other artists. And number 3, personal information. This is a time more than ever that they have to understand and value the personal information they share on the internet and where it goes and what's being done with it, and understand that feeds these algorithms and the AI systems, and our biases are in there and everything else. So lots for kids to learn. If your child's school is not teaching digital literacy, if they're trying to accomplish this in a 1-hour assembly, bad on them. Kids need these skills. So one way or the other, please make sure your kids are learning these important things. So any last words, guys?
No, what's up next?
You know what? We didn't figure that out yet. So stay tuned. We will let you know what our next chat is all about. It's summertime, so we're a little behind the 8 ball here. But we are so grateful to you, Perry, for joining us today. Thank you so much, and congratulations on your research. It sounds like you're at the end of the road with that. So
soon to be Dr. Reed. That's very exciting.
Almost there. Yes. Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you for all the help and great work you've done with us with the curriculum. So, all right, guys, well, you both have a wonderful day, and thank you all for joining us. Again, if you want more resources, check out that AI Hub on the Cyberwise website. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.